Today, some kitchen hacks may seem like traditional hacks to us, but back in the day, they were the pinnacle of modernity. The hacks we discuss today impressed boomers by making kitchen work easier and fun. Let's take a look. Coffee grounds as deodorizers are pretty much some of the best things you can use for a natural odorizer. This was actually a long while before the whole trend of being environmentally friendly started. People simply didn't want to waste all those coffee grounds they were left with, and they didn't exactly want to keep making coffee when they didn't really feel like it either. Yet refrigerators and kitchens would always stink of strong smells and odors, and that wasn't a fact lost on anyone. Lots of people decided that using them to kill any odors that wouldn't go away by normal means was the way to go. Also, lots of people just saw the value in them. Their potential for being recycled was amazing, and it was genuinely a better alternative than all the products you're used to getting. Probably safer on your system too, so the trend just caught on. I guess you wouldn't call this a very old hack. It was actually a bit modern, but it was definitely ahead of its time. People hadn't started dipping their toes into natural alternatives for fresheners and fragrances just yet, but this was one of the first few instances of them discovering that there can be other ways to smell good. The next thing people discovered that really worked was using wax paper for sticking food to pans. So, the normal way to do things was to basically just grease as much as you could with lard or butter. Naturally, people would start using parchment paper sooner or later, but that was more so a modern trend. Back in the 20th century, people began to use wax paper at the bottom of pans so that they could stick food. Honestly, it helped bakers at home a lot. It was much more affordable than the alternatives, and it helped to keep other things people would often use for greasing pans from running low. It became such a top dog in the baking world that it pretty much took out heavy greasing as a method entirely. So this one might really be a wonder for you, but it actually does work, both in theory and execution. Using bread to revive hardened sugar is a classic kitchen hack that basically just plays around a little bit with science to get some much-needed utility in the kitchen. So, people weren't just using sugar, they had substituted it with brown sugar, and that really was prone to hardening a lot. It wasn't good at keeping its moisture, especially since brown sugar had a decent amount of molasses. Those had water content, but it would pretty much evaporate and cause the bits of sugar to lump together. Now, the issue here seems to be that we don't have enough water to keep things going around here, right? Bread, conveniently enough, has an incredible amount of water content. The moisture in bread is around 35 to 45%, and when you put that up against hardened sugar, the difference comparatively is immense. The process by which you take advantage of all this is called diffusion. It helps water molecules move from a densely packed surface like the bread to a place that's missing water. Think of it like a revive in a Call of Duty game. Once you put that bread in an airtight container with the sugar, the vapor the bread gives off naturally starts diffusing into the sugar, and that in turn softens. Pretty neat, right? Ice water to peel eggs is really common, and I'm sure it's something you've heard of before too. See, the boiling of an egg does two things to the egg. One, the protein inside the whites and the yolks comes together and really solidifies. Pretty convenient for eating purposes, but not so much for peeling ones. The heat is what makes the egg expand after all, but it also kind of means the shell sticks to the egg now. When you take that egg that was just drenched in hot water and instead put it in some ice-cold water, you create a cool little thing known as thermal shock. Have you ever been taking a really hot shower and then taken a really cold one, only to find your muscles cramping up? Yeah, that's the same concept here. The cold makes the egg contract, and pretty badly at that. It can be a pretty big pain waiting to peel all your eggs after you just waited a decent bit to boil all of them, so next time, save yourself some time, do everyone a favor and just pour some really cold water in a glass or bowl. So, you really want that aesthetically perfect slice of cake, right? The one that looks like it's right out of a TV ad? The one that just looks wonderfully symmetrical and like it was cut by a pro? You can't get that with a knife, despite what the TV shows. We've all been there, friend. I'll let you in on a little secret too. They probably don't use knives either. When you start with a knife, especially if the blade is dull or blunt, then the pressure that the knife gives off might cause some pretty uneven compression throughout the cake. This can happen because of the knife or just you using too much force, but Whatever the cause, you get uneven slices as a result. However, you don't get this problem with a string line. Know why? String lines create uniform pressure across the entire surface of the cake. You can pull the cake through the cake without much force either, unlike a knife, where you'd kind of have to try to push down. These two factors make string lines almost irreplaceable when it comes to slicing cake, because it means you get the most even slice with the least amount of force. Also, have you ever noticed the way cake sticks to knives? Strings don't really have that problem because of their thinness. Knives, on the other hand, are prone to dragging a lot of the cake with them. So, storing lettuce in damp cloths follows pretty much the exact same principles we went over while we were discussing how bread can help you get your sugar back. It's all about moisture retention, but this time around it's also got a lot to do with regulating the temperature of the lettuce. This really helps maintain the vegetable, because lettuce usually contains a lot of water, and that makes it easily perishable. Bummer, right? Especially when we use it in so many things, which always prompts you to buy in bulk. But that may not be the right idea, since you end up with wilted and dried lettuce, and no one wants that, right? Putting a damp cloth on it helps keep it humid, which means that the lettuce gets a perpetual source of moisture. This helps to keep the moisture in for long, and the cloth itself helps to absorb moisture coming in from the air and helps buffer the temperature too. You get a consistent humidity this way and some airflow since it is a cloth. All of this works really well by giving lettuce essentially the perfect environment it needs to last longer. Cooking with canning jars is one of the most common things to do because they're built to do really well around high temperatures. People use it during sous vide, or to bake, or even when they're slow cooking. These jars are airtight, and their heat resistance really isn't a joke. You should look up how good tempered glass is when it comes to dealing with extreme heat, because it's literally the entire point of picking it out for the canning jars. The jars are usually heated to really high temperatures so that the food inside can be sterilized and preserved, and the glass actually expands and then contracts back to its original size and shape without breaking. This means you can place it on any source of heat, a stove, an oven, or even a pot of boiling hot water, and not worry about any glass exploding in your kitchen. If you cook with canning jars, then the context of slow cooking really is the best one to use them in. The airtight seal really helps to trap moisture in, which helps to boost the flavor of something by several levels. You also get some pretty even cooking since what you're cooking in doesn't have a lot of space, though that comes with some side effects like managing your portion or needing to cook a few more times than normal. Still, I bet you didn't know we could cook with canning jars, did you? Vinegar acidic. And that's not new information. Hell, even a fifth grader these days can tell you that. At least I hope they can. Anyway, don't worry, because I'm here to tell you all about why its acidity is a factor we want to really be appreciating with this hack. See, that acidic nature helps to loosen and dissolve the burnt surface that you see on pans, the icky black stuff that sticks and just won't go away. Acetic acid is actually pretty weak, and vinegar doesn't exactly have the highest concentration of it, but its reaction with the minerals you'd find in burnt food and grease is what's interesting here. The acid actually helps break these down through an acid-base reaction and dissolution. Now those sound like fancy science words, but it basically means that this stuff is really good at helping the burnt food or grease detach from the surface of the pan. It's because vinegar is really good at cutting through stuff like that, which helps it dissolve greasy substances. I guess you can salvage that pan after all, right? Chilled bowls are actually fantastic for placing your whipping cream in because the cold temperatures here really help in keeping the fat in the cream stable. Why is the stability of the fat of your whipping cream a subject you may want to be invested in? Well, that's because unlike keeping a stable diet or sleep schedule, the effects this time around are a lot more immediate. Whipping cream is made up of a lot of fat molecules that get suspended in the water. That's what happens when you whip the cream. Those molecules start clumping together and make what you see. At room temperature even, this fat can start to melt, and it means you lose the texture of whipping cream when it's at its best. If you chill the bowl though, you don't get this problem because the fat actually stays firm and helps the foam keep its shape. Pretty interesting, right? I know I like my whipping cream at tip-top performance, And if you do too, maybe you want to keep this one in mind. Salt is really good at quickly cleaning your iron pans. This happens for a few reasons, but two of them are that salt just happens to be inherently very abrasive, and it's also very good at degreasing. This helps food that's stuck on the pan and any grease that also won't go away to come off easily. You don't want to be damaging the surface of your pan after all. Why is salt like that though? Salt happens to be really coarse, and that makes it really good for situations where you would need an abrasive. Sprinkle just a little bit on a hot pan with a bit of leftover oil and start scrubbing with a cloth. You'll see the difference almost immediately, and that's all thanks to the coarseness of salt. Why does salt work as a degreaser? Well, that's because when you use it alongside heat, salt changes its properties a little, as most things do when they come into contact with heat. Now, salt can help to absorb and break down greasy surfaces because it helps draw that grease away. Salt has a lot of good absorption properties too. It's really good at taking away moisture from other liquids and oils. It's also good for preventing some rust, but that's a little side tip I'm including for free. Storing herbs in an ice cube tray works incredibly well because it really helps to keep them fresh, at least as fresh as they really can be. The herbs are very fragile, and if you've spent a lot of time seasoning your food, this isn't something I need to tell you. The essential oils in these are pretty much non-existent the moment they come into contact with air, and that only starts becoming more of a problem the longer that exposure lasts. They don't do well with lighter heat either, which is why an ice cube tray works for 3 reasons. 1, it helps preserve their freshness. Okay, tell me why, right? Well, ice cube trays put a little roadblock in a neat and slightly annoying process I affectionately call oxidation, and that really helps to keep spoilage issues low. That's all thanks to the cold temperature helping the enzymes stay away from the tissues of the herbs, and in turn, the oils that are with them. 2, there's only so much space in a tray, so you only take out the amount of herbs you need, which helps you keep spoilage to a low anyway. 3rd, you always place these trays in freezers, away from any kind of light or heat, which gives the herbs the perfect environment they need to rest and chill until you need to take them out. Have you ever heard of turning a milk jar into a butter maker? I bet you haven't, because if I'm being totally honest with you, I didn't know either. Yet the process of churning really helps to keep the cream from separating from the fat that you find in the buttermilk. The milk jar, since it's a glass container with an airtight seal, can even help to churn the butter. I'll tell you why. Butter is made when you basically irritate heavy cream and violently shake it until the point that the cream starts to mix together and stick. Then, you take the liquid and separate it, and that is how you get buttermilk. Milk jars end up being the ideal choice for this because they can hold cream really well and also handle the amount of violent churning and shaking you need to really create the butter. The churning is what causes the cream to start turning into butter, and the tight seal really helps you keep the moisture you need to retain the texture. So, you're all no stranger to the concept of heat being really good at sterilizing things. That goes for pretty much every kind of food you've ever had, but it also goes for your bottles too. Why? Well, heat actually kills a lot more things than you might know. It kills pretty much any kind of bacteria, virus, and fungi. And while I'm not trying to imply you wouldn't know that, what I do think is that people, myself included, aren't aware of just how many bacteria there are on surfaces around us. Actually, the number is staggering. They all die of around 212 degrees Fahrenheit though, and that's the temperature of boiling water. This helps to completely obliterate most of these organisms on a cellular level, which is pretty metal if you ask me. The high temperature literally breaks them down into nothing, and they either become inactive because structurally they either just can't work anymore or they are outright killed. Pretty neat, right? Not only do you end up getting your water bottles sterilized, but they end up becoming as clean as they can be too. Cloth bags can actually help your cheese age just right, and I bet that sounds like a really weird mix to you, but it's as legitimate as a mix can be. The right conditions for aging all happen inside the wonderful confines of a cloth bag, so you have that for one. Basically, to age cheese and to age it properly, you need 3 different things. You need moisture that's regulated, and you need a lot of air circulation. None of that means anything if your environment isn't clean, so you need to be able to prevent contamination as well as you can. Moisture regulation is really important because as it keeps aging, then cheese starts losing moisture. Cloth bags, on the other hand, are made of really breathable material and help moisture to evaporate a bit more slowly so that the cheese doesn't get too dry. Cheese aging also helps keep air balanced since the cloth bag is really porous. All those tiny little openings help air to flow around the cheese, which you really need for the health of the rind. It helps for those helpful little bacteria and molds that you find on cheese to grow. Some of those microorganisms don't deserve to die in a heat death. They make your burger a lot better. Third of all, the bag itself just works as a natural barrier against any kind of dirty substance, insect, or material. All in all, you get a perfect vibe for your cheese. Sprinkling flour on any kind of surface always helps with any kind of non-stick rolling. This is again another case of something being a natural barrier. The little barrier that sprinkling flour provides between the rolling pin and the surface of the dough does two important things for it. One, you reduce the overall friction, and two, you prevent the dough from sticking. Now, why does that happen? Well, dough, again, is made out of a lot of water, and that means it tends to become sticky when it gets rolled out. Flour, on the other hand, is really good at absorbing moisture. See, a lot of this is just pairing one thing up with something that's the opposite of what it is so that you can balance the side effects of using it. You use non-stick rolling for your dough, which naturally means you run into moisture issues. You use flour, which is really good at taking away moisture, with your dough that's producing too much. That barrier also works as a little powdery layer between the surface and the dough, and this really helps the dough not stick to the pan. Baking soda is a renowned cleaner across the globe. Got cat piss on your bedsheet? Somebody puked because they couldn't handle their liquor? Just a bad day? Or was that burger not fresh enough? Whatever your stink-radiating issue is, baking soda is there to clean it, but why is it such a universal cleaner? I mean, what singles this one thing out as a cleaner that works in every situation when everything else has designated specialized things specifically built to clean it? This is because baking soda has all the properties you would need in a cleaner. It's only just slightly abrasive, and as we discussed with salt, that really helps in removing unwanted surfaces without causing any kind of bad damage. So that means all of your dirt, any unwanted stains, or just plain old grease buildup are all things baking soda excels at taking care of. The particles of soda are also pretty similar to salt in that they're also very coarse, and this helps clean grime too. Baking soda on top of this is ever so slightly alkaline too. It has a pH of around 9, and most common stains and issues you'll find in homes are pretty acidic. Things like baking soda help neutralize that by breaking down the oils in them, and that helps keep the stains away. It also helps take away the odors from any kind of spoiled food or excess waste too. Again, this is because these odors happen as a result of acid, and as we now know, baking soda is pretty good at canceling that out. So if you ever wanted to see an actual jack of all trades, here you go. Pre-freezing pies really helps before you delve deep into that baking rabbit hole, and it's for two reasons. You get a much flakier crust, which I'm assuming is something you want, and the fillings also stay really even, which I know you want. So, there are some sciencey reasons behind why this happens, and we'll definitely be getting into them. But if you're here for the too long, didn't read the version, then basically, moisture control, temperature regulation, and it helps keep the fat. Now, for the actual explanation. So, pie dough has a lot of cold fat, and that's what helps make that really flaky texture in the first place. Pre-freezing helps to solidify that fact and make sure the fat remains as solid as it can be, and the fat hopefully maintains its structure too. Plus, when you usually bake a pie without freezing it, the soft, soggy, and moist filling can keep the bottom crust really soggy. And this is a problem because you always want a firm base for your pie. The cold temperature of a pie that's been pre-frozen is an entirely different ballgame though. This helps slow the process down in the oven, and overall, the fat at the bottom of the dough solidifies before the filling has a chance to soften it up. The filling itself is also getting more set and firm, and that's because being frozen helps keep it in a solid state, which helps make sure that it cooks more evenly. So, just a small trip in the freezer can give your pie the pick-me-up it needed, huh? String is actually really good, not just for slicing your cake and your desserts, but for stringing up and trussing your poultry too. It helps keep the bird in a compact and even shape, which, as you may have obviously guessed, helps ensure that the bird cooks evenly too. Trussing your poultry with string helps to make sure that the bird is cooking evenly because of the fact that it helps maintain the overall shape of the bird. The legs and wings stay close to the body instead of away, and this helps the heat travel overall a lot more easily throughout the bird. You get uniform cooking this way, which is always better as opposed to, well, ununiform cooking. The poultry really keeps its moisture too, which is always good because, let's be honest, nobody likes eating a dry bird. The tight packaging helps to make sure the moisture doesn't get away, and the meat overall stays a lot more tender and juicy. Trussing also has an unexpected benefit, but since the body stays tighter and more together, the presentation ends up looking better too. This is a part of why trussing your bird around Thanksgiving became such a massively practiced hobby across the United States. After all, when the occasion is special, you don't just want to make a good bird, you want to make it look pretty sitting there with all the toppings too. Then there's the stuffing, which always tends to kill everyone's vibe when it overflows. The aesthetic appeal of the bird, combined with how it just overall cooks a lot better and stays more crispy too thanks to the even baking, means that there's almost never a reason not to truss your bird. Potatoes are really starchy, and this gives them a lot of benefits outside the kitchen and your plate of food too. It helps them take away any kind of excess salt from your dish by just making sure that you don't have excessive moisture. As we have gone through so many times in this video already, the moisture amount in your food needs to be just right for a lot of things to work, as they ideally should. Potatoes, being composed almost entirely of starch, have a massive capacity for absorbing all kinds of liquids. You put raw potatoes into some kind of soup, stew, or sauce, and just watch as it takes away the liquid and salt. Most of the salty liquid gets absorbed by the potatoes thanks to a process known as osmosis. This is what happens when liquids or water move from one object to another to balance out the overall concentrations. The starches of the potato help to make a membrane that helps to draw the liquid into the potato. Plus, besides just that, potatoes are really good at diluting salt. Why does this help? It helps to keep the salt-to-food ratio low, which ensures that your steak or burger is just the right amount of bitter and not overpoweringly so. All in all, a little potatoes on the side have more benefits than you'd initially expect. Okay, so you don't have any string to slice your cake with, and your knife just isn't sharp enough to make the cut, literally. What do you do? Would you believe me if I said that soap bars actually help sharpen your knives? While they'll never help do the job as well as a sharpening rod or some kind of whetstone, they can work as a last resort in a tricky situation where you really need just a bit more of an edge. Again, literally. The reason soap bars are so good for this is because of a combination of a few things we've discussed so far in the video and a few things that we haven't. So, basically, soap bars are lubricating, and you all know that. The soap helps cool down the blade by reducing the overall friction, and while you'd think this is counterproductive to sharpening, it really just means that smoother sharpening can happen since the blade doesn't overheat. This helps preserve the overall standard of your steel. So, soap isn't really that abrasive, but it is slightly abrasive, and this helps sharpen the blade just a little bit thanks to the really gritty particles you find in most bars. It also helps clean the knife, obviously, and that can really help restore some of the edge of the blade. While I bet you had no idea any of this was possible, now you know soap bars are officially in your list of things that help keep that knife cutting edge. Okay, I'm sorry, that's the last one. So wax paper really helps keep ice cream soft because it helps stop those nasty little ice crystals from forming thanks to cutting off its exposure to air. Ice cream tends to get, well, icy or hard over the course of its short life thanks to the large ice crystals that take shape over the surface. This makes it feel really grainy, and it almost means you need to bite the ice cream instead of licking it, and that's just not nice for anyone involved. Wax paper stops this problem right in its tracks by cutting off any exposure to the air, which means that the crystals don't really ever get the chance to form in the first place. This way, ice cream also doesn't lose any moisture as the wax paper helps to retain it. If you don't ever store your ice cream properly, that is, without any airtight sealing, it goes through something known as freezer burn. That happens when the surface of your ice cream gets dehydrated and gets exposed to just a bit too much air. Think of it like getting a cold, if your ice cream could even get that. Just a bit of wax paper takes care of all this, and for almost no effort too. So clothespins really help when it comes to sealing bags, and that's thanks to their effective design. This is because the clothespins help to close the bag without any kind of secondary tool. You don't need pins and a staple, or needles and a thread, or anything really. All you need is a clothespin, which comes built in with a spring-loaded clamping mechanism. Why is this important? Well, it lets the clothespin hold on to items like a bag extremely hard. You kind of want to do that with something as important as your bag. The closure helps to keep any unwanted air outside too, and that means that anything in your bag stays fresh and doesn't get spoiled. It could be your lunch, it could be a salad, or it could be a product that's not supposed to touch air. Plus, clothespins are really reusable, so there's no reason not to be using these. I bet you never thought of adding rice to your salt shakers to help keep the salt fresh and make sure it doesn't stick together, but it really does work. See, salt is good at absorbing moisture, but that doesn't mean that neat little property that we've discussed so much throughout this video doesn't come with some serious side effects. Salt ends up clumping together exactly because it's so good at keeping moisture in. And what's good at absorbing moisture from other things? Rice. Rice is amazing at doing this. It can even take it in from the air, so taking away some excess moisture from salt doesn't mean a thing to the tried and tested unit that is rice. As far as grains go, this one really comes in handy in all kinds of ways. Those large chunks of salt are really difficult to break apart any other way, but if you just throw in some rice into your result shaker, you'll find a world of convenience you didn't even know existed, and it was sitting under your nose all along. Why should you ever use boiled water to clear ice or to get rid of any existing ice? Well, besides the obvious logical leap of hot beating cold, the Mpemba effect is a thing too. While I don't think this is a commonly known phenomenon, it is one we could stand to learn just a bit more about. The Mpemba effect is basically scientists gathering together to observe that hot water freezes decently faster than cold water does. Why would this happen? Well, there's actually a lot of debate on that little topic alone. There are lots of theories that suggest that if you start with hot water, you get some benefits that you otherwise would never get with cold water. For example, hot water evaporates a lot faster than cold water, and that means less overall water has to freeze. Then, you also get convection currents that help cool the water since the cold travels a lot easier. Plus, hot water doesn't supercool, and supercooling is essentially just a state where water's temperature goes below the freezing point, but it doesn't turn to ice. Since hot water doesn't run into this issue, it actually might be possible that this helps it freeze a bit better than its colder alternative. Overall, when it comes to clearing ice out, frozen water traps all kinds of gases. Remember those conspiracy theories about ancient world-ending plagues being released as a result of the polar caps melting in the South and North Poles? Yeah, ice holds a lot more than just ancient sick insects. It can trap pretty much anything, from minerals to air bubbles, and hot water really helps clear this out because it dissolves those gases and kills those impurities. Maybe it's less clearing the ice and more obliterating whatever's inside it. But either way, what you need gone gets gone pretty fast. Have you ever thought to question why people use tin foil when they're baking? It's because it really helps keep the crust from overbaking, or in the worst-case scenario, even burning. Why does it do that, though? Well, the foil acts as a barrier to the heat, so it doesn't let all of it get through. This means that not only do you get even cooking thanks to the edges of your pie being closer to the heat source, you also get to ensure it cooks more slowly and at a more even rate. Pies also tend to have their crusts shrink on them, especially when they're filled with fruits and liquid fillings. The aluminum filling helps to make sure those edges stay in shape and don't pull away as the dough starts to cook and expand. It's not just a decorative choice. There are actually loads of reasons to start using tin foil to make sure you get the pie you should be eating. Back in 1954, Swanson brought something special to the American dinner table, the TV dinner. These convenient, pre-prepared meals, neatly portioned into compartments on a tray, fit perfectly into the emerging TV-centric lifestyle, letting families catch their favorite shows without skipping dinner. By the late 50s and 60s, TV dinners had become a cultural icon, embodying the essence of modern convenience. Everyone remembers those iconic aluminum trays, each section keeping the peas, carrots, and mashed potatoes from mingling. Marketed as a time saver for the busy household, these dinners really resonated during an era when more families had both parents working. The ads played up the freedom from the kitchen, pitching TV dinners as the go-to solution for a fast-paced American life. Grandmas would often have handwritten recipe cards that they would keep passing down through the family, because these were a way to preserve recipes so that even their kids' grandkids could enjoy the delicious things they would whip up. Recipe cards would often be found in binders or small containers, and it was not like a strict step-by-step cooking guide, but a loving tutorial on how to make the most famous recipes Grandma would cook up. This includes Thanksgiving specials, Christmas delights, and Halloween sweets and treats. As you can probably tell, these were keepsakes for a lot of families and still hold a lot of sentimental value. Buttered noodles are a dish so strongly associated with the elderly that they even have another name. Introducing Grandma's noodles, which were a staple of any family gathering back when simple dishes like this were still enough to leave a great impression on everyone at the table. The eggs made you feel great because they added a very warm feeling to the dish, as well as being great for you. The butter itself was just the right touch that the dish needed and brought out the chewy sensation of the noodles so much more, and the overall flavor was something a mix between creamy chicken noodles and chicken cooked in butter, shredded and diced with vegetables. It screamed love in every sense of the word because it was a dish that took effort and, more than anything else, a lot of attention to detail to nail. But if that's the job, then there's no one better for it than the grandmas of the country. Speaking of economics, the following mom-made specialty was homemade pasta sauce. Recently, I was quite shocked to see the huge amounts of jar-filled pasta sauces, as my mom taught me the old-fashioned way to make it with the use of only a few ingredients. For example, the top components to make an awesome-tasting sauce consist mainly of the following: a couple of smushed-up red tomatoes, finely chopped onion, herbs, and spices. Now, bear in mind that I had 2 older brothers, so this sauce was a necessity, as their appetites seemed insatiable. Similarly, pasta sauce is closely associated with Italian cuisine. Although tomatoes were introduced to Italy in the 16th century, it wasn't until the 17th century that tomato-based sauces gained popularity, securing their place in culinary history, with its first mention in a cookbook compiled by a chef, L'Apiccio Moderno, in 1790. Then there were soda fountains, these delightful fixtures of American drugstores going strong since the late 1800s. They hit their stride in the mid-20th century as places where folks mingled over milkshakes, sodas, and ice cream sodas. These charming spots became central to social life, peaking in popularity in the 1940s and 1950s. The soda jerk, as the attendant was called, would mix various flavored syrups into carbonated water, creating delightful drinks on demand. Customers often sat on stools at the counters, enjoying their treats in a lively atmosphere. Soda fountains offered a unique charm, providing a space where people of all ages could gather, socialize, and enjoy refreshments. However, they declined with the rise of fast food restaurants and changes in retail practices as quicker service models became more popular, overshadowing the slower, more social soda fountain experience. Butter dishes with lids were something that you would find in almost every household. Just like you would walk in most homes today and expect to find a coffee maker or a deep fryer, back then, in the age of our grandparents, butter dishes were very popular ways of storing the spread. You would keep them at room temperature instead of in the fridge, so they were always soft and spreadable, and you would protect them from any dirt. These existed even before the time of accessible and affordable refrigeration, and they were made from glass or ceramic. Usually, they would be pretty fashionable too, with lots of unique designs and ornate detail put into them. Speaking of fridges, how did people preserve things before they came around? Because keeping everything in a prison of ice was not ideal either. Speaking of adding butter to the mix and elevating the dish, cheese has a pretty similar effect when you mix it with some scrambled eggs. It was one of the dreamiest breakfasts you could wake up to. The scent of freshly scrambled eggs forming a clear road that guided you to the kitchen, with each step taken increasing that early morning appetite. Once you sit, you are blessed with the glorious glow of cheese mixed with shining yolk and brilliant egg whites, scrambled to complete perfection mixed in with Grandma's special seasonings. That usually just meant a dash of paprika and oregano here and there. What was truly special, though, is how Grandma would manage to melt the cheese into the egg without compromising on how scrambled it was, which is an art lost to them now. Bulk cooking has increased in popularity, trending that Mom did know what she was talking about. Therefore, my next choice for affordability must be casseroles. And I mean, who does not love a good casserole? The variations of casseroles seem to span back to times we cannot even imagine. As it happens, casserole is a French word that means saucepan. It is one of the oldest methods of communal eating, dating back to 1708. On second thought, be honest. Throwing all that you can into one pot, steaming it for a couple of hours, and serving a hot and delicious meal that serves many can be anyone's first choice when it comes to budget friendliness. Who else agrees? Please don't tell me that my subconscious sentimental mind is the only one. Milkman deliveries, a service that started in the United States in the late 19th century, became particularly popular in the 1950s as suburban living expanded. This service involved daily deliveries of fresh milk and other dairy products to households, typically in iconic glass bottles. Milkmen were a familiar sight in neighborhoods, known for their reliable early morning deliveries. The peak of Milkman deliveries coincided with a time when few households had refrigerators capable of storing large amounts of perishable goods, making daily deliveries essential. The most remembered aspect of this service is the milkman's role as a community figure who not only delivered milk, but also served as a friendly, trustworthy presence in neighborhoods. The decline of this tradition came with the advent of supermarkets and improved home refrigeration, offering greater convenience and variety, shifting consumer habits. See, in those times, people had mason jars with really airtight seals. These became essential for the produce and grocery of the time, which was always vegetables, jam, and jellies. Sometimes families, especially grandmothers, would use them for storing meat, and this symbolized how common canning became after the Great Depression and World War I. Preserving your harvest in a mason jar was about the best and smartest thing you could do for extending its shelf life by a good margin. A fun thing they used to do was water baths and pressure canning in mason jars, which was a big habit amongst gardeners and home chefs. There really is nothing like a grilled cheese sandwich, a meal that you have seen in the media, in kitchens, all over neighborhoods, in stalls and diners, and just about everywhere else. Sometimes you are in too much of a rush to make anything proper, or you just might only have some cheese and bread on hand. Everyone still needs to eat, but does that mean we have to wash down something we do not even like the taste of? No! And the popularity of grilled cheese sandwiches is a testament to that. But how did these sandwiches get so popular? Well, most Americans can only remember them as a loving meal that their grandmother would make in times exactly like what we described. The best part is that regardless of what kind of bread or cheese you like, every combo works just as well, which is something we cannot say about many dishes. This brings me back to one important aspect: the value of family. On the other hand, without going on a nostalgic tangent, let's delve into yummy baked potatoes, this time with a twist. Note that this version I am about to discuss has now transformed itself into a popular fast food item. Despite that, it is easy to do at home. All you need is a well-done baked potato, then stuffed with some yummy treats that are budget-friendly as well, and if you are feeling adventurous, a splash or two of sour cream. Perfect! Anyhow, this may seem like a new spin-off to many families, but researchers have discovered that native South American cultures have been using it as a staple for thousands of years. Although their techniques are questionable at best for modern society, as they usually include things like a banana stuffed with rice. Tupperware parties took off in the 1950s, introduced by Tupperware Brands Corporation as an innovative marketing strategy. These home-based selling events saw hosts inviting friends and family over to check out and purchase Tupperware products. The popularity of these parties peaked in the 1970s, combining social gatherings with business opportunities, especially for women. The unique selling point of Tupperware parties was showcasing the product's durability and utility, particularly the airtight seals that kept food fresh longer. The parties were set in a casual, friendly atmosphere where the host demonstrated the products while guests enjoyed snacks and socialized. Tupperware parties created an empowering environment, offering innovative, durable kitchen products and a fun, social selling model, making them a standout phenomenon in direct sales. Nowadays, we just do not get cookie jars anymore. It is not like most households do not use them, but, in the past it was a lot more common for people to walk in, see a glass of milk next to a ceramic cookie jar, and then proceed to have an overly sweet and good time. Today, you cannot get that experience because everything comes pre-packaged and made for commercial mass production and sale, focusing on resealable containers that people do not need storage for in other ways. Today, the typical family focuses a lot on being minimal or having glass containers which are better at storing things than cookie jars, but the aesthetic of them was really nice. So here is a dish that you may not see coming or be prepared for, but it actually works really well this way too. We are talking about peanut butter jelly and banana toast, which is exactly what it sounds like. You take some toast, preferably toast until it's crunchy, then lather it with as much peanut butter and jelly as you desire, and layer it with sliced bananas. You may have only heard of that combo as a part of some protein shake or smoothie, but it works just as well sitting on top of bread as it does in a glass. This is also a perfectly refreshing option for when you are low on work, and grandmas obviously kept that in mind. When they could just tell that somebody in the household needed a sugar rush and a kick from behind to get them into high gear, they would feed them a lot more toast than was probably wise, but it would work every time. The best homemade meal, in my opinion, was lasagna. Nowadays, people enjoy this dish on laid-back Saturday afternoons. And to be honest, I agree. Leave it in the oven for an hour, and a cheesy-filled indulgence is born. These components include the basic kitchen must-haves, layers of lasagna sheets, pasta sauce, and some cheese, of course. It has met those expectations of the history books as well. Did you know that its origins are implanted in the backstories of ancient Greece? Yes, you heard me right. This was not an original Italian cuisine. Nevertheless, many dispute that the first record of such a recipe being written down dates back to Naples during the Middle Ages. But wherever it started, it's now seen as a go-to dish in any household, no matter the country. Victory gardens, also called war gardens, were home gardens planted during World War II to boost food production and help alleviate pressure on the public food supply. This initiative, which started in 1942, was part of the civilian war effort, and it encouraged citizens to cultivate vegetables, fruits, and herbs in their backyards and public parks. During the war, about 20 million victory gardens were planted across the United States, producing approximately 40% of all the fresh vegetables consumed in the country. The gardens peaked in popularity from 1942 to 1945, allowing individuals to contribute directly to the war effort. A standout feature of victory gardens was their ability to foster a sense of self-reliance and patriotism. After the war, victory gardens fell out of favor with the end of rationing and the resurgence of commercial agriculture. Percolator coffee pots were what people used to make their dearly beloved coffee before the age of drip coffee makers in the 20th century. This is how you would make some strong coffee, and it was done by cycling boiling water through grounded coffee. It used a basket and a tube to do those, and they became known for three things: being very straightforward to use and brewing incredibly vibrant and strong coffee. They have been replaced by single-serve Keurig machines and espresso makers because you just get more control over what kind of coffee you want to make with them. But to get that old-fashioned coffee, some households do still enjoy a percolator. Egg salad was another classic that people would often come home to when visiting their grandparents for Thanksgiving or just on the weekend in general. Egg salad typically consists of mayonnaise, mustard, and green onions, which add both color and crunch to the dish. When you think of a salad, your mind tends to immediately think boring and unimaginative, but egg salads can toss those opinions right out the window with just one bow. especially if your grandma left her recipe laying around in some journal or cookbook she compiled all throughout her life. Egg salad in particular would go very well with rye, and it would work as a sandwich too. Grandmas loved bringing this one along for family picnics. When it comes to budget, nothing screams out more than that of chicken and dumplings. The meal can be regarded as boring, but it's a great-tasting delicacy, especially during those cold winter months. Besides it being a great tummy filler, it is truly a great way to cook economically, as all you need to do for the chicken is boil it to the brim of shreds, either in some chicken stock. Next, boil together. As easy as this dish sounds, it is a true version of what family-oriented meals mean. It began as a mainstay in many homes during the Great Depression. Yet, other experts claim that this kind of eating originated when German immigrants first came to America, with the word dumpling translating to Knödel in German. Salad bars started to become popular in restaurants during the health-conscious 1970s. The first modern salad bar is credited to the restaurant R.J. Grunt's in Chicago, which introduced the concept in 1971. These self-service stations allowed diners to customize their salads with a variety of fresh ingredients, including greens, vegetables, proteins, and dressings. Salad bars were initially introduced to meet growing consumer demand for fresher, healthier dining options. Their peak years were in the late 1970s and 1980s when they became a staple in both casual and upscale eateries. However, their prevalence has declined due to heightened food safety concerns and the costs of maintaining a wide variety of fresh produce. Who could ever resist pancakes? Since we are visiting the all-time classics which last even today in almost every child's diet and life, it would be a crime to go without mentioning Grandma's beloved fluffy pancakes. Did you ever wonder what made hers so much fluffier? Pancake houses across the nation seemingly met their match when confronted with a 60-something-year-old grandmother who loves to spend time obsessing over her grandkids. So what is it that home chefs discovered that several brands and franchises could not? There are a few tricks they would use, like letting the egg whites relax in the batter before cooking them, or having impeccable flipping skills so just the right amount of heat gets to each side. Some would just whisk and beat their eggs and batter so well that you got one supremely thick stack of pancakes. It seems the secret was simply the years of pancake-making experience that are hard to replicate. Butter curlers were another little trinket that saw a lot of use in most households, thanks to the simple benefits of life it would let you enjoy, like very pretty-looking butter. Some home chefs were much more focused on presentation, decoration, and maintaining the ambiance with the look of their food than others. They always had butter curlers handy because at formal meals or dinner parties, this elevated the entire mood because of how good it could make your food look. Homes that had hosting and entertaining as a priority always had curlers around, and nowadays some still use them because of the flexibility it gives you. With butter curlers, you could get more controlled and moderate curls of butter out instead of large spreads that really burned through your stock and had you running to the grocer's again and again. Many agree that this simple meal can be enjoyed anytime, anywhere. It boils down to one universal thing: sloppy joes. I, however, do acknowledge that this might not be a very refined one. For this mom-made specialty, all you need are the basics, usually in your pantry or freezer, such as ground beef, salt, garlic, onions, and buns. You could opt to throw everything in a slow cooker or take an alternative route that saves time, taking a potato masher and tenderizing the sloppiness. Then you take a bun, toast it nice and warm, and slap on the meat, and there you go, a meal in minutes. The original story behind this meal dates back to Iowa, where a cook dished up loose meat in between bread with some tomato sauce. This then became a quick favorite amongst many Americans up until today. Instant coffee, made from brewed coffee beans that are then freeze-dried or spray-dried, became widely available in the United States after World War II. It gained traction in the 1950s and 1960s as a convenient alternative to traditionally brewed coffee. Preparing instant coffee simply involves adding hot water to the dried coffee granules, making it ideal for a quick cup at home or on the go. The peak popularity of instant coffee was during the 1970s, aligning with the fast-paced lifestyle of many Americans. Instant coffee played a memorable role in American pop culture, often associated with busy work environments and quick coffee breaks. While its popularity stemmed from its ease of use and consistent flavor, instant coffee has since declined with the rise of artisanal coffee culture. The meat grinders of yesterday were known as manual food mincers, and before electrical appliances and pre-packaged processed meat took over marts and homes alike, they were a kitchen staple you would find everywhere. Manual food mincers let any kind of family enjoy most kinds of food, like meat, veggies, and dry nuts as well. You could have ground meat or minced, which let them make sausages and burgers, steaks, or pâtés. So you could open up access to dumplings for dinner or a cookout with homemade burgers. A lot of meat stuffing dishes like meatloafs and dumplings were also very popular things to make, so food mincers helped in preparing those, and they were very self-sufficient and economical. Cinnamon sugar toast is a delightful breakfast combo that was a go-to for grandmas not just for their kids and grandkids, but for their own mornings as well. Sometimes all you need from the world is a good toast and a healthy hit of glucose, and cinnamon sugar does that like nothing else. Cinnamon in particular started getting a lot more popular as an ingredient during the times most of our grandmas were alive, since a lot of bakeries started using it with maple syrup and vanilla, though it was always a popular choice. It is just that little variations in daily meals did not start popping up until the 1910s or 1920s, and since then, cinnamon has become a mainstay highlight of all things that scream USA food. Next, we have shepherd's pie, also known as cottage pie, a meal that has always lived up to its potential. Whichever way you know this dish, it was one of the many staple meals in my childhood, as leftovers were assured. So, you might be wondering what is needed to complete such a savory pie. Well, I'm about to astonish you, as you only need mashed potatoes, butter, garlic, or herbs, minced meat, and cheese. First off, I would like to point out that there is nothing wrong with taking shortcuts in cooking, referring to the fact that nowadays, pre-packaged cottage pie cook-in sauce is readily available. So go ahead and skip on time if that is your heart's content and dish up a wholesome meal. Furthermore, historical facts are rather compelling, as they date back to the 18th century when this new dish was mainly served in a vast amount of regions throughout Ireland and the United Kingdom. Ice cream socials are community events where people gather to enjoy homemade ice cream, often organized by churches, schools, or neighborhood groups. These socials were particularly popular in the United States during the early to mid-20th century. The peak era of ice cream socials was in the 1950s, when they served as a popular summer activity that brought communities together. These events often included games, music, and other festivities, enhancing the communal experience. However, the popularity of ice cream socials has declined with the rise of other forms of entertainment and the widespread availability of ice cream. Vintage Tupperware was particularly popular in the 1950s and 1960s, and it was known for three things. It was practical, so you could get a lot of use out of it. The designs were fresh, new, and very chic, and they had a sense of style and identity with their use of bright colors. Palettes like mint green and pink were common in the 50s, and most Tupperware also came in stronger, warmer colors like mustard yellow, turquoise, and orange. This led to households always having the chance to design their kitchen and eating space however they wanted, down to the forks, spoons, and bowls, and there was just a lot more variety than you would find today. If somebody said they were bringing out the fancy stuff, you could always be sure you would get some pretty-looking cutlery. We are quite sure that this is a universal human experience that everyone has gone through at this point, whatever corner of the planet you may be from. Sometimes you have to sew something yourself. You ask your mom where the supplies are, she points you to your grandmother, who enthusiastically pulls out a biscuit tin or container of sweets. Maybe you get a little excited and jumpy, as naturally everyone would at the sight of a free sugar rush, but when she pops the lid open, all you see are sewing supplies. Did you ever wonder why they did this? Pasta is a staple in any home, as it can be prepared quickly and affordably. One great example is fettuccine alfredo. It was always a dish to die for. These budget-friendly recipes included pantry favorites: fettuccine pasta, 2 sticks of butter, cream, seasoning, and garlic. Frankly, it might not be a favorite health-conscious option. While many assume fettuccine alfredo originated in Italy, this is not entirely accurate. Many speculate about this theory that it was recorded to have originated in Rome in the 20th century. However, it was invented by a man, Alfredo di Lelio. It is now a renowned dish known by many versions and has been published hundreds of times in cookbooks since as early as 1933. And viola, a legend was born. Baking contests have been a staple of American fairs and community events, gaining prominence in the mid-20th century. These contests allow individuals to showcase their baking skills, competing in categories like pies, cakes, and bread. The first official American baking contest was the Pillsbury Bake-Off, which started in 1949 and remains one of the most prestigious baking competitions today. Other baking contests, often held at county fairs, showcased regional specialties like apple pies and fruitcakes. Baking contests peaked in the 1950s and 1960s, coinciding with a broader interest in home baking and community activities. These events have declined due to changes in lifestyle, with fewer people baking at home. Besides the obvious reason for recycling and reusing things to avoid any unnecessary spending, these tins were also significantly durable and lasted a long time. They were usually always the perfect size as well, and it was as if they were meant to be a permanent home for sewing supplies. Spools of thread, thimbles, needles, and sharp objects all would hold in one box while being very easy to grab when you needed it. Once you were done, you could just put everything back. So our next dish comes with a bit of a history lesson that goes way further back than the time of our grandparents. Ham and cheese quesadillas may have been what they were binge-eating daily and serving up to us, but where did quesadillas ever come from? Apparently, they were not an American invention, and nobody could really find a solid name that they could credit with making the idea up first, until people did some history digging and found out that. Spanish settlers that tried their hand at taking over Central America in the very early days of the land brought Mexican culture with them. The rest, as they say, is history, and the people of the USA took to quesadillas very well. Especially easy variants like the ham and cheese one, which meant that you almost always had a snack that hit the taste buds just right and made you full too. The best part about quesadillas is that they are so quick to prepare and easy to make that you can enter Flavor Town in just 10-15 minutes, which is a pretty good sell for anybody. Convenient food is always the best after all. Meals aren't limited to just meat. Mouth-watering vegetarian curries are a fantastic option as well. Yes, there are indeed a lot of people who believe this dish to be expensive regarding the high prices of fresh veggies these days. Yet, this can be disproved. Thus, I have found a method that is most definitely budget-wise, with the use of a pack of frozen mixed vegetables. Additionally, there is a misconception that this meal is rather spicy. But if used wisely and sparingly, the addition of the vital curry powders can be indicated to be a true winner. While many believe this dish originated in India, historians have shown that it also has roots in Britain, dating back to the time of British rule in India. Automat Restaurants, known for their coin-operated food dispensers, first appeared in the United States in the early 20th century, reaching peak popularity in the 1950s. These establishments offered freshly prepared dishes behind small glass windows that customers could access by inserting coins. The experience was unique, blending fast food convenience with the quality of freshly made meals in a cafeteria setting. Customers loved the novelty and efficiency of serving themselves in an era when self-service was rare. The iconic memory associated with Automat Restaurants is the futuristic feel of getting food from a machine, a concept that fascinated people. Automats were popular due to their affordability, efficiency, and the fun of using the coin-operated mechanism. However, their decline came with the rise of fast food chains, offering quicker service and extensive menus. Grandmas thought that rolling pins were pretty essential to a good baking session. You could not go a day without seeing one be put to use, as it was just a very multi-purpose tool that helped in every way possible. You could flatten dough with them, roll out a pie crust or a tart crust, as well as the doughs for cookies. You could get cookie dough to a very precise thickness with a rolling pin, and many a wonderful batch of gingerbread, shortbread, and red velvet cookies, which were really popular back then, were rolled out thanks to these pins. In the hands of an amateur, they may not be the best tool, but in the hands of a veteran home chef that has been rolling and baking for most of their life, there was arguably no tool better than these pins. If you even needed to make croissants, puff pastry, or donuts, you could use rolling pins. And if you wanted to save a little on birthday costs by baking a cake at home, that was pretty easy thanks to a grandma who knew how to work a pin. There are times where you just absolutely do not feel like getting up and doing anything. And in those times, microwaving some mac and cheese can be really helpful. We are sure most of us have memories of spending the nights at our grandparents' and waking up to some mac and cheese in the microwave, or coming home from school to a bowl that you could lose your worries in. The cheesier it was, the happier a kid would be after eating it. And even at this adult stage of life, a hot bowl can bring all those memories flooding right back in. Mac and cheese started growing in popularity when Mississippi farm families adopted it as a regular meal, and from there onwards it spread to a lot of families everywhere across the states. We thank God for that little fact every day, since we do not know what we would do without it. Lots of people around the globe would debate about the true origin of this next meal, which was always one of many meals my mom, especially my grandmother, used to make. Nonetheless, let's dive headfirst into this delicious meal pantry-friendly chicken a la king. Weirdly enough, as a child, this meal seemed so fancy, yet it could be enjoyed anytime. All you would need are milk, flour, salt and pepper, green bell peppers, mushrooms, and chicken over a heaped spoon of rice. Coming back to the aforementioned origins of this dish, well, it is a widespread belief that it was first served to patrons of New York's Brighton Beach Hotel way back in the 1980s by its inventor, per se, E. Clark King II. Whichever way the cookie crumbles around its history, it's one of those meal options that, by the turn of the century, took flight worldwide. That wraps up 25 old kitchen hacks that exceeded the expectations of homeowners back in the day. Which hack do you think was the most impressive for its time? Comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe.